My name is Jennifer Gray Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director of Rebuild North Bay Foundation. This podcast is specifically designed to bring you people who have been through what maybe you have just gone through or that you are concerned about. We created the podcast How to Disaster to show you the breadth and depth of humanity in the midst of this really terrible thing that happened. I wanted to do this podcast so that I could bring some of the most amazing leaders that I've ever known in my life to you. You may have just experienced a disaster, and you may be looking around and you are dealing with trauma and the shock of it. And you may be wondering, I don't know how to do this part. And so we purposefully made this podcast into different sections and different topics of recovery so that you could pick and choose what would work for you at that time. So welcome to How to Disaster, and thank you for giving us your time. Welcome to How to Disaster. My guest today is Supervisor Belia Ramos from Napa County. I've invited Belia here today because we're going to talk about advocacy. How do you advocate at the local level? And then how do you take those skills and actually take them to the federal level to make sure that your region is getting the maximum amount of federal dollars that you actually need in order to recover? Belia is a fierce advocate. She is an attorney by trade. She is a professor of law at Davis, and she is a fierce advocate for the Latinx community. She's also a single mother of 3 children. To say that Belia is fierce is an understatement, and I am so pleased to have her here today. Welcome, Belia.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to have you on this podcast because I really enjoyed our work together in DC. And I also enjoy watching you as a fierce advocate for your community in the county of Napa. I wanted to start today to hear about your own personal fire story. And if you could start there and talk to us about what role you took on during that disaster and how that served the community.
It is a pleasure to be here with you, with Rebuild, to share these what have become numerous fire stories now in our region. Going back to 2017, I think to put it in context, I assumed my office, brand new supervisor, on January 8th of 2017. And on that day, we had our first disaster of my first term. And we had $40 million of road repair and mudslide and flood damage on that day. And then 9 months to the day, 2017 fires broke out of Atlas, Tubbs, and Nunn, which became known as the Napa Fire Complex. At the time that the fires broke out, I found myself as chair of the board and also with an interim CEO. We were in a point of transition. What that really meant for us, and I think, one of the things that's important as boards and local jurisdictions are dealing with this is to really know how you're going to each play a role in the disaster, right? That's step number one. And fortunately, I say this now looking back, the fires only came into a portion of my district in Napa County in 2017. Every single supervisorial district had fire in it, every single one. So what we really did is the fire kind of determined our roles and what we would do and where our focus would be. For me as chair, it gave me the ability to have the big overview of the fires. And because my district was one of the least affected, with only 13 structures burned, as opposed to one of the districts that had over 400 structures burned, it gave me the opportunity to really focus on what were our next steps. And, as going through these disasters, you live hour by hour in the beginning.
So one of the things I really admired, because I worked in Sonoma County and we had not experienced like the earthquake that you all had, or not to the same degree at all, in I think it was 2015 or 14. So from an external point of view, it looked like your communication systems were much more effective than ours. Having never been through that before, I would say that our supervisors have definitely come a long way since then. But what systems were already set up in place at the County of Napa so that the supervisors had very clear roles?
You know, that's a great starting point when it comes to communication and advocacy. One of the things, because of the earthquake in 2014, and then us serving as the evacuation center for the Valley Fire in 2015, and our numerous floods that we've had into the mix, we already had an informal public information officer system in place with each of our jurisdictions. So the county's PIO and the city's PIO would kind of huddle, figure out whose story it was to tell, right? That's the first one. Whose story is it to tell? Who is going to own the disaster? So what was different is in the earthquake in 2014, it really was City of Napa's story to tell, with emergency services coming from the county. When it came to the fires of 2017, they were in the unincorporated area. It was our story to tell. It was our emergency, but we needed that support because of those numerous evacuations and impacts that you have into your neighboring jurisdictions. So first and foremost, it was, whose story is it to tell and who's going to be your spokesperson? We opted that the chair would be the lead spokesperson, but understanding the nature of the fire, you could see early on in our press conferences, every single supervisor had a speaking role at our press conferences. To me, that was incredibly important because those people that were out in the Mount Veeder area, they would relate and know Supervisor Gregory better than myself. The people that were in Carneros would know Supervisor Wagon Connect. The people up in the Berryessa area would know Supervisor Pedroza, and the people in Calistoga would know Supervisor Dillon. It's important that people see familiar faces. And I think that with this advent of social media entering the government speak and the government communications platform, it's really enabled us to be forward facing with our constituents so that they know who we are. They know who to expect that information to come from. I think what 2017 brought us in terms of that communication is you know your supervisors are going to speak on something. It's almost an expectation. You know, I can't tell you since then how many texts I've gotten. We get a disaster and they say, when are we going to hear you speak? And I say, oh, that disaster is in this area. You're going to hear this person speak. And so really understanding and utilizing, it's the ICMA emergency model, the city manager's model of really looking at who is your leader, right? So you look to your mayor or to your chair of the board of supervisors, and then look at your affected districts, your geographical areas, and use that to set up your communications platforms, expectations, and systems. And from that point, understanding who was going to speak actually became quite clear. And even at this moment, as we're going through our extended disasters of this pandemic, we know who is going to speak. So even when I get a text or a call from a reporter who is familiar with working with me in past disasters, I can say, I'm going to steer you in this direction because this is our point person on this item.
So one of the things that is sometimes difficult for electeds to understand is that they are needed for communication, but they're not really needed in the Emergency Operations Center. Can you talk to us about that?
You know, that is a very, you know, once you have a system in place, I think it's really important for everyone to know, not just the electeds, but also their constituency, that when a disaster happens, your leader hat, your decision maker hat goes away. And the system, the ICMA model of emergency operations is set up that way so you don't have too many cooks in the kitchen. That's exactly why you want it that way. And so you have your emergency services manager and your emergency officer. And those are usually by delegated authority by the board. Those are the people that are running your emergency. And then you have incident commanders within your emergency. And those are people that are going to be running very necessary things like your logistics, like your road closures, like your shelters, food and sheltering. Then you also are going to need to make sure that you're on standby, because while you're not in the room for those emergencies, at a moment's notice, you could have someone, say from the Office of Emergency Services, that shows up, needs a tour, and you need to have that information, be ready to speak and introduce your emergency to the people who have the ability to funnel the emergency relief services and the funds to your county as necessary.
So did you see incidents where because a lot of times in disaster, politics do get in the way, or, like the jockeying for position. So I like that you had it all worked out, but were there any moments where you had to learn a lesson, or you had to say, okay, that's not exactly working out? And if so, like, who goes to the elected official to say, here's a lane for you, but the lane you've been in is not the lane that you were assigned? Because that's a difficult thing for even a county administrator to do.
It is. I'll give you a great example that we had in the 2017 fires, and this was agricultural access. Agricultural access had not been done before, but as you know, 2017 fires was coming in at the tail end of our harvest. And we needed people to get to their tanks. We needed grapes to be picked. I have a photo that to this day just gives me chills, of my father picking grapes with the Atlas fire coming over the hill. And my dad was simply trying to get 15 tons off the grapes and get out of the area. Agricultural access became that very politicized issue, right? We are from the wine growing region. It is an economic force here in Napa, as it is in Sonoma County. And so getting the pressure of I need access, and how you balance that with the person that says, I want to go feed my dog, that I wasn't able to get into the car. And dealing with road closures and having, people drop names of supervisors at road closures and say, I know so-and-so. Having to have that conversation in the middle of a disaster and to say, this is not working, that was a really tough one. In that circumstance, the person who came to us was the person responsible for the road closures, our sheriff. Our sheriff came to us and said, this isn't working. Don't hand out, people are coming to road closures with your business cards. This is not the best system in place. What came out of that was actually a great model that I'm proud to say has been used in other areas by CAL FIRE and incident management teams when running incidents, and that is through the Agricultural Commissioner's Office. You fill out a request for a permit. They are processed by need at the agricultural level, as it being a true agricultural need. And as those permits get issued, there are escorts that take people up, or at least if a road has been cleared, allow them access into that area for a limited time period, provided it is safe. They are difficult conversations to have, Jennifer. Another one I will say, a very difficult conversation was one I had with an elected from a city who had a very emotional statement on camera during a press conference that turned out to be a not so great headline the next day. And it was a "You are not welcomed here" headline. And it was one of those moments where you have to lean on the relationships you have prior to these disasters, because no matter how well written your playbook is, I can guarantee you that playbook is outdated for the next one. These last two fires, the LNU Hennessy fire that we had and the glass fire, back to back, one not even contained while the other one started on top of a pandemic. Our 2017 playbook is not applicable here. It doesn't work. And you have to be able to pivot. You have to be flexible. And you have to have tremendous situational awareness of where you are needed. And, I'll say in the Hennessy LNU fire, where I was needed was not on that incident. What was needed was for me to lend my staff over to that incident and for me to maintain the steady course on COVID-related items. So it just really is about situational awareness. It's about offering up to your colleagues, what do you need from me? And knowing that people aren't always going to ask when they need the help, but we need to be ready and able to provide it.
I think it's also hard for people to understand that in the public sector, government is made of people, period. And not everyone is equipped to lead in the middle of a disaster. Not everybody can do it. It's like your emotional city person who said, whatever was construed as you're not wanted here, because you have to take on a dual role of you are undergoing the trauma yourself, and then you're having to be a leader in helping other people actually navigate during this time. And what I witnessed during 2017 was a huge mix of what elected officials were able to do emotionally. Their styles of leadership became very apparent in both good and not so good ways. And it was difficult at times for them to be able to hear or to get to the place where they could say, what do you need and how can I help? Instead, they figured that they were supposed to sort of fake it till they made it. And in some ways that's true, but it's not. It's something that the public isn't always privy to, is how difficult that spot can be when you're in a position of public leadership.
Emotional competence is something we don't talk about enough in these elected roles. I really think that ability to speak with people honestly, yet not emotionally dump on them, give them the information they need to make prudent decisions about safety for themselves, and then to be able to give them that information that people want to know, good, bad, or otherwise. They want information, but to do it in an artful way that is transparent, yet not venting, that is empathetic, understanding that everyone is experiencing the disaster in a different way, and to not make it about your situation, but to also know when you must. To be able to be vulnerable. I've learned to despise the phrase trial by fire, because that is exactly what happened to me as a leader, as I was in this very public facing role. When I had a friend in Germany that told me she saw me on BBC, and that I walked into Tahoe months later and people recognized me as the lady from the Napa fires. It was being placed in a spotlight where I had to compartmentalize what was going on for me. That I had to compartmentalize that when the virus broke out, I'm a single mom, my 3 kids were sleeping, and I had to go, and having to deal with telling my parents, I need you here, knowing that there's a fire behind their house, and to be able, in my 5-minute drive over to the sheriff's department, to put that in a box. And for the world to not see on my face, I didn't see my kids for 72 hours. For the world to not know that I slept no more than 3 hours for a week each night. For the world to not know that when the cameras turned off, I cried in the hallway. It's a tough role, and it takes a lot of courage to know when you're at your max and you can't anymore, because the strength of your community, and also for those of us working the disaster, the strength of our employees, 1,500 employees behind me, comes from the pace I set. And being able to do that in an incredibly transparent yet strong way is incredibly important as an elected in these disasters, especially when they are those quick and fast moving disasters.
I think it's really important to be super honest about when you are a leader in a community, that you too have a breaking point or a stepping off point where you need to breathe, when you need to cry. I know that I cried probably every day for 6 months post in 2017 and into 18. And I would just, even if it was like a 2-minute cry in the car, okay, fine. But it was necessary, right? And it didn't make me weak. It just made it necessary, because it's very, until you've been through a disaster, there's no way to describe how it feels to see that level of destruction, especially in your case. And in my case, we both grew up in the same area that we ended up serving during the disaster. So then you see this level of destruction, and it's very heartbreaking. Very heartbreaking. But I did want to go back to something you said, and that was, you were talking about your dad. And one of the questions that comes up if you are in an agricultural area such as the same as what we are, is that while we have these major fire events, there becomes also a health and safety of the workforce, in particular our Latinx community. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, was what comes up for balancing the needs of your agricultural community, of the owner class, with the people who are actually picking and are often undocumented and don't even have, if that's the case, don't have access to a lot of the government services that documented people do. But it's incredibly important that they're also taken care of, because they tend to be the ones who pay the largest price for a disaster, in particular after. Can you talk about your advocacy in that area and give us an idea of what that issue looks like?
Absolutely. I think during a disaster, especially, let's look at fires and COVID, making sure that employees understand the safety requirements to protect themselves individually. So making sure for COVID PPE, but also N95s during fires themselves. And this is where philanthropy comes in. Philanthropy is incredibly important to making sure we have the systems in place to protect all residents. Because as we know, when it comes to federally declared disasters, the levels of paperwork and the steps you must go through are quite numerous to be able to access funds. So making sure that you have those foundations set up, much like Rebuild North Bay, that was able to provide services, the Redwood Credit Union Foundation that was able to provide services here locally, the Napa Valley Community Foundation that is able to support our family resource centers. But I think this is a transition that I want to talk about in terms of who gives that message. I always, prior to the 2017 fires, I considered myself being Latina, being from the daughter of a Mexican immigrant farm worker. I thought, well, I'm a trusted communicator, but I no longer am. And having that realization that I am now government and I need someone else to deliver my message is incredibly important. Understanding your boundaries in terms of communication also requires you understanding where you are no longer effective in communication. I am effective in doing an interview on a radio station. I'm effective to some degree of doing a Spanish print, and put that one aside from the literacy standpoint. Where I am most effective is to be seen with people who are the trusted partners, your family resource centers that have that direct communication with your Latinx population, with those health clinics that have that direct relationship of trust with the Latinx community to make sure that the information is getting to them and that they are also the messengers of where the services and support can come from. That is where the investment needs to be. I no longer am the communicator. I truly believe we need to use what's called the promotores model and to find those people that are the better messengers of communication. I actually went to go and speak at a promotores symposium in Oakland to explain what a promotor needs to do for government, how you can be better at it, because I've become I've become institutionalized, I guess, in a way. If you really want to look at it that way, you really want to make sure that it's that familiar face, that confidential person that is going and reaching out into your Latinx community to deliver those vital messages of health and worker safety, but also the resources that they need to access during these times.
Who is Fannie Mae? Fannie Mae is the largest provider of mortgage financing in the United States. We own 1 out of every 4 loans in the country. How do I find out if Fannie Mae owns my mortgage? Fannie Mae has a loan lookup tool available at knowyouroptions.com. It's simple to use and will show if we own your mortgage or not. Why does it matter who owns my mortgage? If making your mortgage payments becomes difficult, who owns your mortgage really matters. For those who have mortgages owned by Fannie Mae and are experiencing financial hardships, there are several programs available to help. Today we are focusing on options for those impacted by natural disaster, such as a fire, or financial hardship caused by COVID-19. One of the options available is a forbearance plan. How does that work? A forbearance plan provides the homeowner a period of reduced or suspended payments to manage a temporary financial hardship. For hardship to be caused by natural disaster or COVID-19, homeowners may be eligible for an initial plan up to 6 months with the possibility of a 6-month extension. During a Fannie Mae forbearance plan, the homeowner is not charged late fees. Do homeowners need to enter into a forbearance plan immediately after a disaster event? No. If you received additional living expense assistance after the disaster event and those funds have run out, you may still be eligible for a forbearance plan. What happens when the forbearance plan ends? Your lender or service should contact you during the forbearance plan to see if you still need assistance or are ready to resume making your mortgage payment on completion of the plan. If you don't hear from them, you should proactively reach out to have a next step in place. Once the plan ends, the balance that was reduced or suspended from the mortgage is due. However, if you are unable to repay the balance in its entirety, you may arrange a repayment plan or, if eligible, qualify for other programs such as a payment deferral, flex modification, or another workout. Can you please explain the difference? What is a payment deferral? A payment deferral allows you to bring your mortgage current by delaying or deferring repayment of past due amounts. This option keeps your monthly mortgage payment the same as it was before the hardship. The total deferred amount will be due on the last scheduled payment of the date of the loan. Should you sell or refinance or pay off your home, the deferred balance is included in the total remaining amount due. What about flex modification? Flex modification is Fannie Mae's standard modification program. It strives to provide a 20% principal and interest payment reduction on your mortgage. Once the modification is complete, the loan's term is extended to 40 years. Depending on circumstances, the modification may result in a reduction of interest rate and/or principal forbearance to help you achieve the targeted payment reduction. What's a principal forbearance? Principal forbearance is when a portion of the unpaid principal balance, basically the remaining loan amount, is put into an interest-free balance secured by the loan as part of the modification, and is due at the modified maturity date or with early payoff. Where can homeowners get more information and assistance? More information is readily available at knowyouroptions.com. When ready to request mortgage assistance, reach out to your mortgage company, also known as a mortgage servicer. This is the company you send your payment to each month. You'll find the phone number on your mortgage statement. Additional relief assistance is available through our Disaster Response Network. Here, impacted owners can work with HUD-approved housing counselors to get help requesting financial relief through FEMA, insurance claims, and more. Homeowners can visit knowyouroptions.com/relief for more information or call 877-833-1746. Once again, that is 877-833-1746.
I think it's important too for communities with a large Latinx population to understand that a traditional sheltering model may not work for them. Despite COVID, which it's not going to work right now during COVID anyway, but there's a huge fear of immigration being there. And so the message that we've sent out repeatedly, same as I've seen in Napa, is to really put it out there through the family resources centers and the trusted partners that immigration will not be a factor in these shelters. So I'm sure that you've seen some of that as well.
Yes, and this is where the relationships and the advocacy come through. So reaching out to your member of Congress, our mutual member, Congressman Thompson, that is able to get you a stay of enforcement from ICE is incredibly important during disasters, so that you don't have to deal with any sweeps during any immigration sweeps during that time. So it's a suspension that's incredibly important. But then using that information of the ICE enforcement suspensions and getting the right messengers to send that out into the community. Those are those family resource centers. I think one of the moments for me and really understanding how we each bring something different to the table. We're individuals, and I made a decision on the fly during a press conference to make the announcement of the ICE enforcement suspensions in Spanish during a press conference. That garnered national attention, the fact that I did it. And I did it because in my mind, I thought to myself, well, what is likely the predominant language that people are speaking who need this information? In our community, it's Spanish. And so making sure that we're meeting people where they're at in terms of communication is just as important as the message you are delivering, so that it is in the language that is most receptive, that it is in the medium that is most receptive. And as government, we move sometimes slow. It takes us a few times to get the right systems in place and just in time for some platform of technology to change on us. But it's important for us to be able to understand who needs to get the message and how do they need to get the message. We always focus on what is the message. We need to also focus on the who and the how.
I think that's so key in any disaster is you have to be able to always ask, what do you need and how can I help? And I find that starting from that space is what's really changed the efficacy of whatever program we're running or whatever campaign we're doing, because then you start with meeting people where they're at. So I loved it that you said that. I do want to pivot though now to federal advocacy. Belia has gone with us twice to DC, and I really value her presence there for a number of reasons. But one of the main reasons is that we sort of will talk ahead of time about, what's our strategy in this meeting. We have with Rebuild, we represent Lake Sonoma, Napa, and Mendocino counties, and that's my dog. She likes to be a part of these. And in doing so, that means that two of those counties have federal advocates, lobbyists, if you will, and two of them don't. And so we need, what I ask of Belia every time is for her to take a lead role in those meetings in order to also provide a voice of support for the entire region. Can you talk to us about why you take the time out of your busy schedule to go on federal advocacy trips? And for a lot of people who've just experienced disaster, they don't know they're not completely clear yet on how long this process is and how many years they're actually going to need support from the federal government.
I think, when you look at what your role is after as we're moving with adrenaline through a disaster, and I'm going to say a short-lived disaster like a fire, an earthquake, a flood, you're moving through it, and you get to that point where you say, okay, it's over. But what I would say to any elected official is, no, your work has just begun. The work that comes from disaster recovery is an incredible lift. One that each time I must say it can be overwhelming. But as with any situation in life, someone always has it harder than you. And I think that that's what has really helped me understand our partners in the region of Rebuild with Lake and Mendocino. And knowing that, at the time when we went, more than half of Lake County had burned. And I remember thinking about that and thinking, half of their county has burned. More than half of their population has relocated. And there was one moment where they had $48,000 in the bank as a county. And they could not afford to purchase a plane ticket for a supervisor to go. And thinking, putting my mind around that, that's a harder situation for them than anything I've ever had to face here in Napa County. I have a gift, and that is I am from Napa County. And when I say I am from Napa County, it opens doors. I don't ever need to explain where I'm from. Everyone in DC knows where I'm from. And I can share that gift, that blessing with Mendocino and Lake County. And for us, it's important when we are looking at advocacy, we need to not look at it in an insular way. We need to understand that if someone from Lake County is displaced, they are likely going to a surrounding county. And so we are all interconnected. If I don't help Lake County and Mendocino County and Sonoma County, for that matter, fix and help them through their recovery and their advocacy, their problem becomes my problem. And now being in a position where 48% of my county has burned, I am incredibly proud of how Sonoma and Napa County have stepped up in advocacy to help Lake County in that moment, because I know what that feels like. I now know how hard and how devastating it is to say nearly half your county has burned. And that's only been in my first term. It's important when we're going through.
I do want to give a shout out though for I am always and forever impressed and in awe of the resiliency of Lake County in particular. It's an incredibly beautiful county. It's very under-resourced. Mendocino County, much the same. Under-resourced, incredibly beautiful, very rural. And so it's not exact. We're very rural in Napa and Sonoma counties, but we also have a couple of larger cities, and we're closer to, we actually touch the Bay. So it changes a lot of how people choose to vacation here, own homes here, how they invest here, and their emotional attachment, which means that we garner far more in the way of donations when a disaster occurs. Mm-hmm. It's why it's extra important to make sure that they get the federal funds that they actually are due and have earned through their disasters. So,
and one of the things that I think is important in understanding, especially if you are from California, right? I think it's a great transition to understanding that a California disaster is not the same as a Midwest or an East Coast disaster. And we've had that experience in advocacy. I remember, I think one of my moments in bringing a little humor and levity into the advocacy room with FEMA was to tell FEMA that we needed to do California math, not Florida math in the room when we were looking at advocacy specifically for the rebuild of a fire station in Santa Rosa. When we went on our trip in 2018, our first advocacy trip, little did I know that when we got to our 2019 advocacy trip, part of my job would be advocating for Sonoma County as well, who wasn't able to join us on the trip because of the ongoing Kincaid fire at the time. It's incredibly important that that as a region, when you've had a region that's been affected by disasters, that you come up together, to advocate for each other, that you understand that you are interconnected. From the basic building blocks of your transportation systems to your housing stock, but also the imports and exports of jobs that happen within a region. You're interconnected, and it's important that you all come up together and you rebuild together, because it's a slow process. It's an incredibly slow process. And it's, as much as you'd like to say, oh, you get your federal declared disaster, you get your FEMA assistance, you call it good, that's not the end of the road. Every single disaster requires something different. In the Tubbs fire, we dealt a lot with soil issues because of how fast and how hot the fire burned and the amount of scraping of soil, very different. Now in the LNU, we're dealing with water system issues because of how close these fires came to certain water systems and the replacement of pipes and pumps. And I know in rural parts of Sonoma County, you had well issues as well.
Can I interrupt for a moment just to say
Sure.
that one of the things that I think surprised us, I know it surprised me, was that I wasn't aware of how FEMA was on a learning curve. having to do with wildfires.
Mhm.
Same with HUD. And with FEMA is much more set up traditionally for wind and rain events. And they do understand earthquakes, but the thing about wildfire, especially the kind, we have these mega fires, is that the type of destruction that they do is not the same. So it destroys the infrastructure under the ground. The cleanup is different. It's all very different. And so I just want to note that one of the things that I have felt really proud working with you and other public sector people is helping FEMA to better understand what it means to have a mega fire and what the damages are and what the needs are. So I just wanted to interject that.
Absolutely. And I think that's also part of the advocacy, that continual advocacy. And I remember having the meetings in my boardroom with FEMA and with Cal OES and having to sit there and say, so who's doing what? And not be afraid of asking the question, right? We have these systems in place through the federal government and through Cal OES and Cal Recycle to help us with cleanup and disaster recovery. Ask the question, who's doing what? That's incredibly important because sometimes there might be nobody present in the room that knows the answer to that question. So you need to not leave the room till you have an answer to the question of who's responsible, how you're going to divvy up the work. You know, as we go through another round, you know this well, Jennifer, the DARs, the debris and ash removal forms that need to be filled out with another impending deadline coming up. Now, much like the Napa Fire Complex, we are consolidating the glass and the LNU and getting all of that together, dealing with it similarly as a complex. There are a lot of unknowns as you go through it. And part of the advocacy, you know, in 2017, it's not quite sure of which adjective to use because fortunate's not it. We were first, right? We were first in these mega fires. There was a lot of focus on us. There was a tremendous amount of love and empathy coming our way because of it. I still reflect back to when we had the benefit concert at AT&T Park.
I have to say, I had to leave after an hour because I was so weirded out by being part of the subject of a benefit concert that size. It was really nice, but it was surreal.
It is very surreal when you look back at these situations that we've been placed in. But when you, having had the opportunity to be the first in line, but then, you know, then became the 8th and then now the 14th and 18th or something like that in these mega fires. Part of the job is to distinguish yourself. You know, what makes your circumstances so unique, and doing it in a way that doesn't minimize other people's disasters. I think that's the artful part, where we have to be cognizant of that. When we had the opportunity to bring the Rebuild Paradise Foundation with us on our last advocacy trip, and to have them in the room talking about their situation and how different it was from ours, yet we were all unified by a terrible wildfire ripping through our communities, and we could still learn from each other. You know, understanding that, you know, for us, a very big part for us here in Napa County, we only approve about 26 to 30 homes in our unincorporated area each year because of land use restrictions and citizen-led initiatives. So to put that into perspective, I remember having to say in DC, we lost 26 years worth of housing. You know, having those numbers, putting that story in front of people for them to understand is incredibly important. Having the opportunity to sit with people that are going to make donations. When the JP Morgan Chase group came with their CEO group just a month after the 2017 fires, and they kept their reservation, and to sit with those CEOs that were there and to explain to them what the impacts were of the fires, that help them to be generous to Rebuild North Bay, to the Napa Valley Community Foundation. That's part of your advocacy as well. It's not just advocacy for the county, the formalized county with the big C. It's the county with the small c as well. And to understand that you play a role in how you tell that story, how you tell the hardship and the resilience of your community to every single person. It's going to make a difference in someone's life. And to know and to still go out and about and be at Safeway like I was last week, and someone told me, I heard you speak at an event, and because of hearing about you, we made a donation to this organization to help with disaster recovery. That's the stuff that advocacy is really about. It's full circle advocacy. It's not just what comes in to your county general fund.
There was another thing too that you sort of touched upon, which is that, especially because we are in a pattern now that we expect to continue for at least another 10 years of these mega fires. And so like I was in Oregon a couple months ago, and they had the worst wildfires they'd ever seen on record. And they had done a lot of mutual aid in California, but had never experienced these mega fires up in Oregon. The same thing happened in Washington and in Colorado. And so one of the questions from the communities that I am doing outreach with asked was, well, how do we even do this advocacy? How do we make sure that our voice is heard? And it's a funny spot to try to find. I don't want to call it a sweet spot, but that's sort of the analogy that might work. To both be very promotional of your own needs, and at the same time partner with your neighbors and partner with other fire affected communities. And I was really tickled on our second advocacy trip in October of 2019. It was our third, but our second with you, where Supervisor John Hatchick from Mendocino County had never been on one of these. He was a newly seated supervisor, such a nice guy. Oh my goodness. And that, when we had one of our free nights, that then you took him and you guys went scootering all over DC. But I also saw it as you taking an opportunity to sort of, bring him in and show him, and to show him like how we do this. And then you and I, we'd be in the meetings together and with the agencies or with senators or Congress people, and you and I would look, and I'd be like, I do a little finger thing, and then you knew just how to throw it to John, so that while you were there helping Lake and Mendocino, you were also doing another sort of advocacy, which is showing John how to advocate for his community.
And that's part of, we need to not reinvent the wheel, right? We found, I think sweet spot is the right phrase here. We found our groove. We found how to be effective at what we're doing. And it's important for us to share that. It's such a different way of looking at governance. I see it as, take my stuff and run with it. You need to do this on your own. And here's my playbook, take it with you. And I think that's incredibly important, because we can learn from each other a tremendous amount. And to be able to share those experiences, to be able to know what is happening, and one, it can provide insight to what we experienced, but it can also help us guide others. And I think, one of the things in communication where we learn the difference between the VoIP lines and the fiber optic lines versus the hardwired lines, and what happens in these communication systems. And to know that when the fires had hit Ventura County and we're going down into Malibu, and you saw these, we heard the story, everyone saw the pictures plastered all over television. The fire trucks are at the beach, and everyone thinks, oh, well, if the fire's over there, what are the fire trucks doing over there? It was their only hardwired line.
Yeah.
We were able to take that story with us to DC, into the FCC, and to say, someone needs to give us notice, give us 20 minutes time to know when this is happening, so that we can lift up other systems in place, so that we are not beholden to one hardwire line. It happened to all of us. To be able to then turn it over to a colleague and say, tell us what happened in your community when you lost your communications. That's incredibly important. Again, it's the same struggle, and we all experience it in different ways. And being able to tell that story so that we can improve upon it. And in fact, we already have improved from just our advocacy trip in 2019, when we talked to the FCC, and we had talked about how we had lost broadband, and because it burned, it was on telephone poles and it burned. And so the last mile really became the last 10 miles in some jurisdictions because of loss of connectivity. And to see the FCC step into action and to start working on those DEERS reports. And before I had walked out of the building, that they had already talked to one of the cell providers, they had already confirmed that with us. To see your work come about to impact not just your own community, but the entire nation when we deal with disasters, that to me makes it all worth it, jet lag and all.
It is one of the things that I love about the model, that we're regional and multi-sectored, and that we try to keep the cost down as much as possible. It is a position of privilege. I understand that, for us to be able to have an organization like Rebuild North Bay, or have the relationships that we do, but you actually don't need a huge amount of money, and you don't need a formal organization necessarily to build those relationships. It's often picking up a phone and calling. Like, I only knew about the Malibu story because I went to Malibu and sat in Reva Feldman's office, the city manager. And so hearing that she was running the city from the lifeguard shafts, and that's exactly why we saw those fire trucks on Zuma Beach, is because there was no communication to go up there. And I like the idea that the work that we do with you and the advocacy that we've done makes it so that future communities that are undergoing really one of the most painful and traumatic things that will ever happen to them, that we have in some way lessened the trauma and made the system a little smarter. And I've also found that the agencies welcome it, and the leadership welcomes it, because they need to hear from us. They need to hear from anybody listening to this who's maybe recently undergone a disaster. You have to make your voice heard, and it is more accessible than you think, and it's more important than you know. It's like putting money in the bank. Even if that federal block grant may not come to you for 3 years, it will come.
Making sure that we were able to look at all the challenges that disasters face to counties, and to be able to come with those solutions. Like you said, legislators welcome it. And when I talked about needing CEQA, NEPA reciprocity, and to have the statute of limitations line up between state law and federal law, and then when we were able to attach it to the FAA reauthorization bill, and it went through, I remember when I got that call, and I thought to myself, this is probably one of the biggest advocacy wins I have ever had. And the only people that will really understand it are like my roads crew people, right? But either way, it was a tremendous win that is going to benefit the entire state of California and all those jurisdictions that have not yet had a disaster, yet it will help them in the event when, if and when they do. To know that we are not only able to advocate to help ourselves recover from the disaster, but we have truly paid it forward. And that's why I keep saying yes to doing this kind of work. You know, I remember it took me three advocacy trips to get it done, and lots of meetings. But once it finally did, I'm like, well, now what? That one's done. Now I need to go on. Now, what do I come up with next that needs to get done?
They are, there is something wonderful about getting great work done, especially in DC, because it is a magical city, and we will look forward to the end of COVID so that we can return to that. I would like you to spend just a moment talking about how important it is to have a really fierce advocate at the federal level in the form of our local congressman, in our case, Mike Thompson. For any of your federal representatives, it's really wise if you are an elected official, especially, to develop a relationship in advance that is functional, that is honest, and that is effective. Can you talk about your relationship with Mike a little bit?
So my relationship with Congressman Thompson is quite unique. I am a former staffer for Congressman Thompson. I worked for him in his first term of Congress, first and second terms. You know, I come at all of this in a very different way because I have that staffer lens still on. And so to be able to have a relationship with Mike where I can call and I'll say, here's my struggle. He knows I've already done the work on the back end, and that I've really honed in on what that next challenge is. And you know, some of the things can sometimes be as simple as a phone call, you know, from the congressman. I'll give you a great example. In 2015, when we were running the evacuation center for the Valley Fire and the Red Cross, in order to have volunteers, and we had over 1,000 residents at the Calistoga Fairgrounds. We had 1,000 residents there, and at the height of it, we had 253 volunteers. And I was, as a volunteer, not a supervisor then, I was managing the volunteer station. And the Red Cross wanted every volunteer to do a 2-hour online training before they volunteered. And it was no exceptions, myself included. And I remember in that moment, I called the congressman and I said, this is not working. And we need people fed. We need items sorted. We need to get things moving. That was one call that he made to Red Cross Washington, D.C. And they flew someone out the next day and things started happening. And it was one call. Having that relationship in advance, I can't overemphasize the importance of it. You need to be able to have that relationship. And sometimes it's as simple as, you know, me texting the congressman and saying, hey, I just talked to Congresswoman Eshoo about this broadband bill. And so that he knows what conversations we have had to his colleagues, so he can come back on the back end and follow up. And I'll tell you, sitting here in my desk, I have right on my desk is a handwritten note from Congresswoman Eshoo, who remembered that and had the congressman followed up right behind me. And I have a note from her thanking me that both of us were on the same page. That's incredibly important, to be on the same page, to have that same advocacy, because it's going to be long-term. It's absolutely going to be long-term. We are all optimistic and hopeful, and we'd like to say that a time frame and to say that a disaster is going to end in 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 2 years, but we still aren't rebuilt from the 2017 fires, and we've lost another 600 homes this year. So it's a long road, but having those good partners at all levels, being able to ask for help from your member of Congress, your state senator, your assembly member, and having that relationship where you can reach out to say, I need this from you, but that they are also confident to ask you for advice. What do you need from me? And to also have the relationship within your jurisdictions with your elected officials so that you can lean on them, so that it can be as simple as what I've made the call now 3 times to the mayor of the city where I live, American Canyon, and to say, Mayor, I need you to stand up a shelter for me. And he just says, okay, we're on it. And I can move on to the next task. As simple as that. But that requires relationships. That requires investment of time. And don't wait for a disaster to happen before you establish those relationships.
Well, I think that's a good place to actually leave off. And, Belia, I always enjoy you. I really appreciate you. And thank you so much for your support and for spending time with us today.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I'm in it for the long haul with Rebuild.
I'm looking forward to also scootering with you in DC and hopefully breaking that.
You know I'm good for it.
I know you're good for it in heels. So that's for sure. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us on How to Disaster, a playbook to recover, rebuild, and reimagine. I want to leave you with this one thought. Thank you for spending your time with us. And we want you to know that you can get through this. You can recover, rebuild, and reimagine. But there's only one way you're going to do it, and that's together.